Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the C Show. My name's Chris, and I'm here with Jordan Dale tonight, who is a researcher in 9/11, and he's going to answer some questions for me. Jordan, do you believe that 9/11 was an inside job?
Well, what do you mean when you say inside job? Because the actual term has a lot of meaning and carries a lot of baggage.
Okay, great question. Do you believe that our government planned it and carried it out?
No.
Okay. Do you believe that our government allowed it to happen for an entrance strategy into the Middle East?
Highly possible.
Really?
Yes.
Do you think that? Are you basing that on like maybe what could have happened in Pearl Harbor?
No.
Is it true? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No. I mean, that's been pretty, I guess, well known or debated for almost 20 years now. We had a huge intelligence problem leading. Well, basically, you want to go back to '93 when during the first World Trade Center bombing. We've been following, Middle Eastern terrorism all the way up until then. But it was so compartmentalized that we didn't have enough chatter in between, our different departments in our intelligence agency. That there was a lot of conflict. So I mean, as far as like, you have to look at it. There's a big intelligence failure. I mean, after the Gulf War bombing, we didn't have an exit strategy for the Gulf War bombing. That's why we left so quickly. We decided to go back into the Middle East, and that was just a debacle because, again, we didn't really have an exit strategy. But ever since then, when we decided that, hey, we're going to be in the Middle East, you had, I guess, maybe too many chiefs and not enough Indians, if that makes sense. So, but we had all kinds of intelligence warnings. General Wesley Clark talked about it. Condoleezza Rice talked about it. I guess the whole thing was that nobody really thought that somebody was going to. We have to look at it like, when was the last time before 9/11 we had an airplane hijacking? People are like, it was a long time. And people would look at it like, we could have a hijacking, but did anybody think that they were going to fly planes into buildings? No, because our history of hijacking is somebody hijacks a plane, they kill a few people, and they want to fly off to another country. So that was kind of off the radar, even though that we had intelligence reports that, you have this alleged person of Middle Eastern descent, wanting to take flying lessons. So there was a lot of information flying all over the place, and not enough people talking. And in my opinion, I think it got to the point where it got ignored. And going back to your question, do I think that they let it happen? I mean, I guess your guess is as good as mine, but I got kind of really interested in Middle Eastern terror after the first World Trade Center bombing. I just found it very interesting about how we had an unconventional enemy that's basically been our enemy since the 40s. Leading up to that, basically the fall of several prominent or modernized governments, in Iran. Iran used to be a place that had universities and sprawling cities and style and culture. And then when the extremists got in, it completely turned around. So
the night of the bombing, I can't remember what the security advisor's name was now, but according to him, President Bush was pacing back and forth saying, find me a tie-dye rack. Find me a tie-dye rack. And he said, Mr. President, there is no tie-dye rack. Paul Wolfowitz, who was in the first Bush administration, he went to work for a conservative think tank had been trying to find a entrance strategy into Iraq since 1997. I mean, are all these coincidences? I mean,
well, I mean, they don't really have to be coincidences. They could have just been 100% true.
why are we wanting to go to war with Iraq?
Well, Daddy went to Iraq.
But Daddy went to Iraq to drive Kuwaiti forces or Iraqi forces out of Kuwait. Daddy said during the debate the reason he did not take Saddam Hussein out was U.S. forces would be seen as bitter occupiers in a hostile environment with no exit strategy.
Which is what pretty much every country that we've ever dealt with has ever said with. So, I mean, in my opinion, yeah, but,
Also created a power vacuum between
absolutely.
So now you've got a power vacuum and, and one thing I'll say about Saddam, and people who's listening to me is probably going to go ballistic. Saddam was a ruthless leader, but Saddam also kept those people in line.
Yeah, he did.
You did not have Islamic extremists over there. You did not have people chopping off heads. People putting in tiger cages and setting on fire. When we took out Saddam, we opened Pandora's box.
Well, they did have some of that. I mean, Saddam's history of, the thing with the Kurds and, I guess it depends on whether you believe a lot of the people that are extradited for that country that said, hey, this is what's happening. These are the war crimes that are happening. He's killing his own people. Why would those people lie? But you're right. Saddam did keep those people in check. They, he had a firm grip on the Middle East. But at the same time, well, what I'm saying is that at the same time, this is an unconventional enemy to us. You have a point to where they're going to say, well, we're going to go in and swing our dicks here and there. None of that really mattered because those people don't understand modernization because they've been living in a third world country ruled by a dictator. They don't know.
I understand, and that's the only thing that they understand.
Right.
And I want to touch back on something you just said a while ago about war crimes. Okay, yeah, he committed war crimes. Well, war crimes are committed in so many countries all over the world. Why are we picking and choosing who are we going to, go after?
Well, the Middle East has real estate, and they have assets. I don't know if you remember Wesley Clark. Wesley Clark did that interview. Trying to remember what year it was, but he had basically, I'm paraphrasing what he said, is that, the U.S. has a plan to take, 8 Islamic countries. And that he said that one day some White House official came by his office and said, hey, did you hear what we're doing? He's like, no, what? He goes, we're going into Iraq. He's like, why? And the guy's like, I don't know. After we left Kuwait and the Gulf War ended, in my opinion, and you can read about it heavily, is that I think the U.S. saw an opportunity for real estate. It wasn't so much about oil because there was more money in the real estate to where the oil was to where we
get more oil from Canada and Russia and Venezuela than we do.
True, but it's not necessarily let's go in and take their oil. Let's let them keep their oil, but hey, let's see if we can make a royalty off of it because why not just have?
I don't think it was so much that. I think it was so much more that we had a foothold in every other continent in the world, and we needed to have a foothold in the Middle East.
Right. Well, that goes back to what I was saying. What Wesley Clark had said. He said that was the plan all along. Since the get-go. However, I also think that 9/11 hadn't happened, we still would have had a power grab in the Middle East. There's far too much opportunity money to be made.
I agree with you totally. I mean, they had been working on that ever since that when Daddy Bush left office, and Daddy Bush was the only one telling them, well, besides Colin Powell, that you're making a huge mistake.
Sure.
I believe Colin Powell's words were, I'll never forget that picture with him and Rumsfeld out there, and he had his finger in his face, and he told him, he said, you broke it, you bought it.
Oh, yeah. Well, that But that goes back to what I said is I think that a lot of these people just didn't realize the repercussions that they were going to start by going into this because they're like, you know, they I mean, some of them even said that, even Colin Powell talked about being liberators. Well,
I
history is,
I don't think Colin Powell ever actually believed that. I believe Colin Powell was a soldier and he was following orders.
well, no. What I'm saying is that I think that what Colin Powell was saying is that a lot of the people on the ground would be that they would be looked at as liberators.
Yeah,
That didn't happen.
The thing about it is, it's what somebody's got to look at it is, yes, in France we were liberators, we were invaders.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is that even if you have somebody that's living in a third world country that's being controlled by the dictator, as we both agreed that Saddam actually, took charge. I mean, he did take care of people, and it's like, do you trust these people from another country that your government says that they're not to be trusted? I mean, remember all the propaganda during Desert Storm? The American soldiers are going to come in and they're going to rape our children and rape our wives and all that kind of stuff. I mean, those people are just going to believe whatever they're being told because that's all they know. So there was a lot of pushback that just because the U.S. was there and they were going to stop Saddam Hussein, not everybody wanted that. And that's the big thing that turned out is that that's how insurgencies are started. And that's how the insurgency started. They had all kinds of pockets after the Gulf War. Then you had the major split between the parties. When the parties split in the Middle East, and they started all these different sects. And then you have Al Qaeda, and you have ISIS, and whatever else comes out of the Middle East.
I can't remember what that one guy's name was, but Islam. I mean, you had so many of them that broke off. I mean, I'm not a fan of him at all, but one of the best ideas I ever heard was from Joe Biden in 2008 when he said, divide the country into 3 separate nations as a confederation with a loose government, set up demilitarized zones, and divide the oil profits.
Sure.
But back to the question I asked. So you do not believe that 9/11 was allowed to happen in a nefarious way?
Like you mean like, hey, this is an opportunity for us to
get
a foothold? I guess I'm kind of iffy on it. I mean, half the time
I'm with you on that. I can't say. I mean, honestly, I would, if you was to ask me, I would lean towards yes, we allowed it to happen.
Yeah, I think that, but at the same time, it's just like I said, I've always held the position that even if 9/11 didn't happen, we would still be involved in the Middle East, and not just like a touchy-feely kind of way. We would have found some way in.
I mean, how do 15 hijackers get past the world's most secure defenses in the world? And you can tell me if this is true or not. The planes that were scrambled that morning that were taken away from the East Coast. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, but this is a pretty easy question to answer. I've never really understood why people keep saying it's the most secure in the world. Maybe secure from like outside forces, because that's what you're always looking for. But you have to remember the attack on 9/11 came from inside America. It's right. Not like these people just all of a sudden just boarded planes. They've been planning this for months, if not years. So when you're saying how could they have done this, I'm like, well, they did it like you and I or Joe Blow down the street would have done it. They got on a plane, they hijacked it. They already knew how to fly somewhat, and they crashed into a building. Now, why people think that couldn't be stopped by our security forces? Well, because the majority of the time we're looking for stuff coming from outside the U.S. not inside the U.S. We don't have a contingent. We haven't had a contingency plan for what would happen on a day like 9/11 in America. We don't have that. We don't have a protocol for that. I mean, you have to look at it this way. Do you remember who Payne Stewart was, the golfer?
I remember who now?
You remember who Payne Stewart was? He was a professional golfer.
Yeah.
Okay. You remember the story about how his plane went off a radar?
Yeah.
Yeah. The military couldn't find his plane. They couldn't find it. They scrambled jets out. The jets couldn't find it. There's this crazy notion that the military can just find anything at any time. I mean, we have a gigantic airspace. If you're looking for one plane, and if you don't know where that plane's at, it's going to be pretty tough, because when the transponders are turned off, because that's the first thing that when the air traffic controllers can't see the plane, so no one else is going to be able to see the plane either. The only thing they can give is a last recorded coordinate of it. They turn the transponder off, nobody can see the plane. They can just say, hey, this is where the plane is. So they go there. But you also have to remember is that they kept marking planes as being planes that were hijacked. So there was a lot of confusion, because this has never happened before. We never had a contingency plan for something like this. So it's very easy to see, well, how did they get past the security forces?
Is it true NORAD moved the jets away from where they were supposed to be?
Because they didn't know, they didn't have enough information? Absolutely. But if we're talking about they did it intentionally, I mean, that's a big stretch. I mean, I just gave one example that pretty much kind of solves that whole riddle right there. If you don't know where a plane is, and you have if you have a lot of information coming in, when you already had one plane strike a building, and now all these other planes are, for a good example, a condensed version, if you've ever seen Flight 93.
Yes, I've seen that.
Okay, so the guy that plays himself, Ben, I can't remember his last name, that pretty much goes through how all the confusion about how they were trying to radio aircraft that controllers thought, hey, I think I got a hijack, I can't get a hold of the pilot. And then they got a hold of the pilot. Then another guy has the same thing. So you have a lot of information going from a lot of people coming in at the same time.
Right.
This is just confusion. I mean, but we have conspiracy theorists that say, oh, well, we have this technology. I'm like, no, we didn't have that. We have better technology now, but we didn't have technology to track the aircraft like we think that we track, or we should have tracked aircraft. I mean, Payne Stewart is just one example. We're talking about human beings here. And that's one thing about air traffic controllers. They rely a lot on memory and sight. They have to know their flights. And if you have a bunch of people that are now scared because now they know that a plane hit the building and they suggest hijack, and now everybody is like really paying attention, and the information gets skewed. So it's not crazy to think that the wrong information got to NORAD, and NORAD said, well, go here. Oh, well, no, go over there. I mean, if the military can't find a plane because they don't have the right information, how are they going to find it? They're going to go by sight. They're going to radio the pilots in the air, and they're going to have to scramble a jet over here. Hey, do you see a plane over here? No, we don't see a plane. They're not going by computers. They're going by eyesight. They're going, this is the last recorded area where this plane was, go there. They could have got the wrong information. It's really simple. It doesn't have to be this sophisticated thing, because once you break it down, when the information that you have to rely on is not there, the only thing that you can rely on is the human factor. And we realize that how bad the human factor can be, especially in a high intense situation. So, I mean, they have it now, and I don't even know if you even know anything about air traffic controllers. They are, and this is even prior to 9/11. They are watched continuously for fatigue, for making mistakes around the clock, because their information is crucial to everyone's safety in the air. And if we've never had something like that before, and all of a sudden now we know there's a hijacked aircraft and it's a heightened situation where we've already had a lot of people die because they crashed in the building. I mean, you got to keep your cool, but at the same time, you got to think that there's going to be a lot of information flying. Tempers and emotions are going to be flying, and that has to be factored in there. We can't just think that all of a sudden we're just a bunch of freaking robots and we're just be able to just, transfer, information to the right people all the time. But that just doesn't seem to enter the mind of a conspiracy theorist. It's like, we are robots. This is the most sophisticated military in the world. Nothing can get past us. Well, all you have to do is look back at history and see how many mistakes the military has made. We're not perfect. We weren't perfect on 9/11. We're not perfect now. It's just, but that's just kind of goes on your, why did NORAD do this? It's not that NORAD did this. This is what they probably thought that they had to do with the information that they had. And when they didn't have it, they had to tell their fighter pilots in the air, hey, look out your southwest. Do you see a plane? No, we don't see it. They weren't relying on computer and radar because they couldn't find the plane on radar. So you have to radio to a pilot in the air. Do you see a plane? No, we don't see it. So they went to the wrong location. And besides, you have to look at it. They're miles away. You can cover a lot of ground in a 767. And if you're scrambling a jet and you send in the wrong direction, the thing's got to turn around and go in the right direction. So then you have to actually go find the plane because the plane's not on radar. So you have to visually go find it. I'm not a fighter pilot, but I can imagine that's probably pretty difficult to do, especially when you have no idea where the plane's at. You're relying on somebody on the ground to tell you, hey, go here. It's basically, you're playing a game of hide and seek, and you got a blindfold on. You're waiting for somebody to give you the correct information so you can do your job. If they don't give you the right information, you can't do your job. But again,
is it not true that on the morning of September 11th, NORAD conducted between 4 and 10 war games exercises from the North American Aerospace Defense Command in Colorado? Drill scenarios included false hijackings of commercial airlines. Info content level was dropped to its lowest level normal.
That's true and not true. The hijacking of aircraft is not true. But here's the thing: military war games are played all the time, like every day. So 9/11 is not a special day when the military runs exercises all the time, every day.
Is it not true that large numbers of interceptors were moved to Canada and Alaska?
I'm not aware of anything like that.
Major FFA and NORAD networking confusion, difficulty distinguishing between real world and exercise events.
I don't know, but maybe going back to my thing where, if you haven't had something like this and all of a sudden you're running an exercise and somebody say, hey, this is no longer an exercise, I'm sure that could probably confuse some people.
And I'll just ask you a few more. If you don't know, just say, I don't know.
Sure.
Is it true that network communications jammed, phantom planes and false alarms went off, and unusual procedures were delayed?
I don't know, but I'm sure that's highly a possibility.
Unusual high-ranking staff not available or replaced by first day on-the-job staff.
Could be.
Of the 4 interceptors protecting the entire eastern quadrant, 2 interceptors were finally scrambled but sent way off course, arriving too late. War games were only suspended once the morning's events were over and done with.
I'll take your word for it on that.
I'm not saying this is 100% true. I have not actually took the time to research that, so I don't want to say anything.
Well, the only thing that I'm really I guess quote unquote knowledgeable about would be the 2 aircraft that they scrambled out of Langley. Okay. If they scrambled any more or they were going to, I don't know.
Let's see. Look at here. I mean, this sounds like most people would say a false flag. The jet that went down in Shanksville, do you believe that jet was shot down?
I suppose it's possible. We don't really have too many really good eyewitness accounts of the plane actually hitting the ground. Um, you know, my take on that is that it was already admitted, and Cheney even gave an order that they were going to shoot a plane down.
And I mean, you can't blame them for, if that actually happened.
No, you couldn't blame them. I mean, you would have saved a lot of lives.
Yes.
But
if you remember, the coroner said after 20 minutes he was no longer looking at a plane crash because he found no bodies.
Well, I would look at it like this: if you had a plane hitting the ground at a high rate of speed, I don't know why you would actually find bodies.
I mean, I wouldn't see them disintegrating.
Well, nobody said they disintegrated.
But
the coroner's report is pretty detailed about what was actually found.
I've never actually read his report, but I will go back and say if that order was given from Cheney or Bush or whoever, I do not fault them at all for shooting that plane down.
No. But here's the thing. I mean, if they did shoot it down, you would obviously find probably entire intact bodies, or large remains. But obviously, the coroner didn't report on any of that. So, I mean, is it a possibility? I mean, since they already gave the order for that, it's possible.
I think it's very possible. And I would actually say I think they probably did shoot it down. And again, I don't blame them for it taking place.
Right. And then the question would be, why didn't they just say that? Like, well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe people wouldn't be able to accept that. Maybe make a lot of people mad. I mean, that sounds.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think in the way our society is, I think 50, 60 years ago, everybody would have applauded it. We became a society that we wouldn't have handled it, I don't think.
Yeah, we're for the most part, we're a pretty civilized group of people. I think we're probably more civilized then than we are now, but I look at it like, I'm not a person that's going to say, I think that they shot the plane down. I say it's possible. I mean, I think the plane crashed. It's not just one person. And see, that's another thing. It's like, well, this is what the government tells you. Well, the government didn't tell me anything about 9/11. The evidence collected by everyone from Tom, Dick, and Harry to farmers to first responders. That's the official story of 9/11, not what the government reported on. And that's another thing, is that so many people say, oh, well, you just believe the official story. No, I don't believe the official story because I don't think there is an official story. We just have a story that is being told from witnesses, and then we have another entity that basically puts it all together. Now, some people will say, well, the government, they didn't put all the correct information in. I'm like, well, you'd have to talk to the witnesses about that, because I haven't really seen too many witnesses that have come out and said, well, that's not what I said. That's not what I saw. You don't see too many of that. So, but then of course, the 9/11 troopers they'll get into, well, these are just paid actors. I'm like, everybody's a paid actor. If it doesn't go with what you believe, they're a paid actor. They're working for the government. I mean, I don't know. I guess the government has a bottomless paycheck where they can just keep paying people off, hoping they won't talk. But I'm not aware of any witness that came out and said, that's not what I told the police, or that's not what I told the person that was interviewed.
I don't believe it was some a bunch of false actors and stuff like that. I don't think that we probably know the whole story
Oh, I agree. You're never going to know the whole story. You're
I'm
never
not,
going to know the whole
I'm not
story.
meaning that in a evil way. I mean, I think some of it's probably to protect, you know, different, um, um, sorry, things. You know, I no, I don't think the government was 100% truth on 9/11. Um, and I think a lot of it is probably what, like when CIA Director McCollum said there was a benign cover up. I think some of it was they wanted to cover their ass because they totally dropped the ball on this.
Yeah. I mean, even just today, there was a report out today about the secret depositions with Saudi officials by the lawyers who are representing the victims' families. And basically, what this is talking about, I don't know if you're familiar with Operation Encore. Operation Encore is basically the 9/11 victims' families that are trying to get to prove that, you know, either in part, directly or indirectly, that the Saudi government uh, helped fund the 9/11 hijackings.
I mean,
Uh,
I could believe that.
well, I can already tell you that's 100% true. And what I'm saying is that Saudi Arabia has a history of, and maybe not just, let me back up. Let me just say that, you know, Saudi Arabia is 100% responsible for 9/11. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that Saudi Arabia has a long history of funding terror. Uh, there's a lot of indirect evidence of that. There's a lot of fake cherries that went around. Um, a few years ago, Netflix had a documentary about this very topic, and I can't even remember the name of it. I've tried to look for it, but it delved deep into the Saudi Arabia's charities where that money was followed, and that money was followed directly to the hands of Al Qaeda. Um, but back to this report that was released today. I mean, the victims' families, uh, they're wanting to know because, you know, they're wanting to know how this money got into the hands of two of the hijackers that were on Flight 77, which was Khalid Madhar and Nafar Hamzi. Uh, there's evidence that that money came from these charities. These charities that have been gone unchecked forever. I mean, as long, from I remember that this documentary that I did see a while back, and just from some of the research I've done, this has gone way back into the 90s, is how some of these terrorist groups got their money, which is very plausible because how else would they be getting their money anyhow? Uh,
Right.
you know, I mean, it makes complete sense. It's not like these guys are selling hot dogs on a street corner. Uh, they don't have real jobs, so they have to be getting their money from someplace. And I mean, how many charity scams are in the U.S.? A lot. So it's you know, highly probable that that's where they got that from, and whether the Saudi government, or at least some part of individuals maybe, that help this money get into the hijackers' hands. Now, I'm not sure if you remember Prince Bandar bin Sultan, who was the former
Yes.
he was the former Saudi Arabia ambassador in the U.S. And he was highly respected in Washington. Had a lot of good. He had a lot of friendships, but you know, one friendship really sticks out, and that's George W. Bush.
Uh,
They were good
yeah.
friends. They went on fishing trips together. Um, I'm sure you're familiar with the 9/11 report and the 28 pages.
Yes.
Okay, so the 28 pages basically centered around Bandar's role in uh, actually getting uh, money, either directly or indirectly. Except they already were able to source that some of that money came out of his own personal bank account, and that's like after they captured Osama Bassan, who was a former Saudi national. that he had admitted to the FBI that when he was living in San Diego, he lived right across the street from two of the 9/11 hijackers. And the biggest problem that Saudi Arabia saw with that was because 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudis. I don't see that as a coincidence at all.
I don't either. I mean, 15 to 19 now. I mean, you can't tell me that 15 to 19 had came there. They funded by them, and they just I mean, I'm sorry, I just don't buy that.
No, but that goes back to what I was talking about: is this relationship with the president and the former Saudi ambassador, and that Bassan's wife. She received money. She received thousands of dollars that ended up in terrorist hands. I don't see that as a coincidence. And the 28 pages pretty much talk about that. Now, I'll talk to some of my, I guess, quote unquote, internet friends who are 9/11 debunkers, and they think that this is crazy. And I'm like, I don't see what's so crazy about this.
Yeah, it's some of the things that, and I hate to get off on this, the things that are other interests, but it's kind of like there's things that I can't ignore about Oswald. Like going to Russia, Mexico City trip, things like that. These type of things I just can't ignore. I mean, you can't tell me these are all coincidences.
Like Oswald and these Saudi princes. They were not just regular people. They had certain connections. And when you have a connection to the president of the United States, and then the 9/11 report comes out, and then you have 28 pages that were classified because the president has a friend who all of a sudden is tied to this money trail. And then what happened to Bush and Cheney? Well, they got interviewed. But they got interviewed off the record.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, to me, we're talking about covering up the president's relationship with possibly some of these Saudi nationals that received money. Then that money ended up in at least that we know of, two of the hijackers' pockets. A lot of people that are definitely not 9/11 truthers, they seem to like really want to glance over that, or they want to say, oh, well, there's no evidence for that. I'm like, there's some pretty strong evidence once you classify it. And then not only that, beyond that, you've got the U.S. Attorney's Office telling the 9/11 victims' family that they can't sue Saudi Arabia. Well, because they're an ally of us. To me, that's a bunch of horse shit. I mean, if you have credible evidence, then you should allow an investigation, not try to, classify it and say you can't do it. I mean, and who stopped that? Well, W stopped that. And as far as I know, he's never been asked that question. Now that he's not president, I don't think he's ever asked that. And if he was, he wouldn't talk about it. So.
Oh, absolutely not.
But anyway,
what so what do you think was the reason for him doing it?
I mean, guilt by association. You've got not just an acquaintance, but close personal friend that's been to the White House, been on your boat, been to your ranch in Texas. I mean,
what's Bush getting out of it?
Huh?
What's Bush getting out of it?
Not being accused of possibly being friends with a criminal. When he might have been able to, I don't know. This is before like not being able to stop it, but when you're taking steps to classify a page that pretty much names your personal friend as being somebody who possibly aided in the 9/11 attacks, that's pretty embarrassing. I mean, I don't think that you have to be a genius to realize that that's pretty embarrassing. And people are like, well, that's just an embarrassment. You know, why would they hide that? And why would they hide that in a report? I'm like, because he's the president of the United States. I mean, I don't understand why that's so hard to like, what that just seems to escape people. Oh, well, it was just a mistake. That's a pretty big mistake if your close personal friend is now being tied to terrorist groups. Probably that's really not good for you. And then to go on and have your Justice Department say, yeah, the 9/11 victims' families, they can't sue Saudi Arabia. We're going to shut the investigation down. There's really nothing there. Before there was even investigation to even find out there was something there. But then the FBI comes out and says, we did our investigation. We didn't find anything. So we just stop. We're just done. It's under the rug. I mean,
and there's a lot more questions that are left with answers.
Well, there should be more questions that people are asking, but a lot of people just don't want to talk about that. In social media chats, you bring up the 28 pages, and people like roll their eyes. They're like, "Oh, this has already been covered before." I'm like, "It's not covered. Obviously, it's still ongoing because we just had a report released today, about Operation Encore. I mean, it obviously isn't done. Why can't we talk about it? And you don't have to be a 9/11 truther. You don't have to be a person that thinks it was an inside job to have a discussion about it. I mean, I think that you and I both agreed that we're not going to know everything about 9/11. We're not going to know, we're not going to know everything about really anything. There's always going to be some level of secrecy. I mean, good or bad. I mean, I think that's just kind of the way it works in Washington. It's the same thing with the JFK files. Why can't we see them all? Well, as the American taxpayer and just the regular Joe Blow, you're not privy to this kind of information, no matter how much that you think that you deserve to see it and view it. I mean, that's just not the way that it works. Is that fair? No. Could it be a matter of national security? Yes. Could that be an excuse? Yes. I mean, there's all kinds of things, but the fact that we don't want to talk about it, or people think that oh, you're just another conspiracy theorist when you talk about it. I mean, obviously, if we just keep having these reports on it, I mean, these families aren't 9/11 truthers. They think that Saudi Arabia is involved in the attacks, so they're not conspiracy theorists. So why are you getting labeled as being conspiracy theorists if you all of a sudden want to talk about the 28 pages and Bush's fishing buddy? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. But
right.
So, but that just seems to get people's feathers riled up pretty quick when you want to talk about that. So,
why would the Saudis want to go after us?
I'm sorry?
Why would the Saudis want to go after us?
Well, I wouldn't think, if you're saying the Saudi, like, why would Saudi Arabia want to go after us?
Yeah.
I don't think it's really like that. I just think that you've got possibly some rogue individuals, some rogue departments.
Right.
I mean, we have rogue departments. I mean,
of course.
That's no secret that the U.S. government doesn't have levels of rogue. We know that.
Yes, absolutely.
You have retired military personnel that have talked about it. They've written books about it. But it's not necessarily, why would Saudi Arabia want to do this? I'm like, well, if we're talking about like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, like wanting to attack the U.S., I mean, they don't really have a military force. We are their military force. Pretty much. We've been providing security for them since the 70s, when we had the oil embargo. So, it wouldn't be really smart for the Saudis to, attack the U.S. when we pretty much provide all their security. So, that's another thing to think about.
I also think about this the other day, and I told somebody, I said, had something like this taken place in, say, 1938 or 1939, we would have destroyed 30 million people over there. I mean, we would have killed so many people in the Middle East.
Well,
We fought wars the way we did in World War II.
Because of 9/11, we've killed more people. I mean, it's not just that, I'll tell you this. I was living in, I attended the Coca-Cola 600 in Charlotte, North Carolina, NASCAR race, the very day that we bombed Afghanistan. They, in fact, delayed the race so we could watch the news coverage of it. And they didn't give an announcement. They just I can't remember. I mean, they weren't into race ceremony, start of race ceremonies, but
I don't know exactly what it was. It was the NFL game of the day was about to kick off right around noon.
Oh, okay.
And the country is so impoverished. I mean, it's like going back to when Christ walked the earth, because the bombers, they were going back with still full payloads because there was just nothing to bomb.
True, but
and
sorry.
they, I mean, I can't explain what it was like when I was in. I remember I was in a briefing and this right here's what told me then that we're going in. That was behind this. It was in January or February of 2002, and I was in a briefing. I think I was at Fort Lee, and I was about half asleep, and they was giving us a briefing, and I heard the captain say sometime between February and May of 2003, we will be going to war with Iraq. Well, this was in January of 2002, and I perked up and I was like, wait, what? What do you mean we're going to war with Iraq in 15 months? For what? I mean,
Yeah.
They already had everything planned out.
Yeah.
I think excuse me. I checked on my doctor right now. This for everybody sound. This is I kind of think of this as a little psychological. Fathers their son. I think some of it was Bush wanted to up his father.
Oh, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. But that's just how that's kind of like how. That's kind of how the presidents are. They're always wanting to one up the other guy.
Well, I mean, and not only presidents. I mean, like a father-son, rivalry.
Oh, sure.
Bush was like, well, you should have took him out the first time. I'm going to show you what a real president should have been. When his father was smart enough to know they should never did it to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a day. I'll never forget it. I mean, I can remember. And I lost a lot of respect to him because how he went crazy. But I mean, the proud or the heroism you could see of Giuliani that day as people were running to get away, and he had a mask over his face, and he was going to the disaster. I mean, that showed leadership that day. I don't know what happened to him.
Oh, yeah. No one's going to deny that. I mean, we weren't more American on 9/11 and 9/12 than I think we've been since World War II. It's unfortunate that it took something like that to bring, because I mean, I remember I was living on the East Coast when that happened. And I remember how everybody came together. I mean, you couldn't walk anywhere without seeing an American flag. I mean, so yeah, I mean, 9/12 and that, the weeks and months after that, I mean, I don't think we've ever been joined as a country more ever since World War II. But it's crazy that it took that kind of a tragedy to bring us together like that. It's unfortunate that we can't do that now.
And
And
and for
I,
that day, because Bush was, you had to keep him president, or had to keep him locked away. Uh, you know, uh, uh, Giuliani was the leader of the country, so to speak. At least the leadership, because people were looking to him.
well, I think that people looked at Giuliani as being the face of America because it was his city. And I mean, he generally had a lot of compassion for people. So, yeah.
And I mean, and you're right. I mean, it's sad that a lot that takes to bring us together. A tragedy like that, and I don't know if we'll ever see something like that again unless we're attacked. But I mean, it's a
Well, it's
day.
just, yeah, I hope we see I hope we see that camaraderie again, and it doesn't take a tragedy to do that. But I don't know.
I mean, I don't see it. I mean, you know, and not to get into politics with him, but at first the way he was handling it, Trump had such a golden opportunity there with the coronavirus, and he totally just let it slip away.
Right.
He let his approval ratings get up to the highest as what they had ever been. The rally around the flag, and he just totally botched it.
Right.
And he had a golden opportunity then. George Bush, and I've said this before, he had a chance to go down as one of the greatest presidents in American history, and he just totally blew it.
Yeah. He
Uh,
did.
he Bush, the mistake Bush made is Bush was not his own man. Bush surrounded himself with people like Cheney and Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld and Ashcroft, and he let those guys control him.
Right.
And Bush realized at the end, they said like the last 4 or 5 months, him and Cheney didn't even speak. He realized that Cheney cost him his presidency.
What you just smoking there?
Oh, that's pot.
Oh, okay. Hey, I don't mean to cut you off, but I need to take a break. I need to take a piss and have a cigarette. But let's continue this. We can get into like I guess more of the conspiracy theories if you want.
Yeah, we can do that. I can just cut the or just pause the camera, and then when you come back and you're ready, then we can just start back.
Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and leave this on. And
Okay.
okay,
Well,
so
I'll
yeah,
just go ahead and leave it on. I'll just go ahead and leave it on too because I can go ahead and cut it.
okay.
You're okay. You don't have a problem pot smoking, do you?
No, that's what I'm gonna go do.
Oh,
So
the
yeah,
cigarette. Yeah.
yeah,
No.
all right,
Yeah.
all right. But yeah, I'll come back here in 15 minutes or so.
What I'll do is I'll just cut this. I'll just cut this
Okay,
tape, and then when you come back, then I'll start back recording.
all right, sounds good.
All right.
All right. Jonathan.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, it might be empty then. Yeah, I was empty the last one. Oh, you were? Yeah. I got, because I started busting pretty hard. I got you. I don't want to drink all the All right. All right, I'm back.
Okay. So where was we at? We was in the conspiracy theories now. So
Yeah, if you want to go into that, sure.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think the government was involved. I think there's a possibility the government could have let it take place to get us into war with Iraq. Yeah, I don't see, uh, you know, uh, planting explosives in buildings and taking them down. I do question how a plane flies 10 feet off the ground and hits the Pentagon. That's one of the things that's always bothered me.
Well, what bothers you about that specifically?
Well, I mean, you're going to fly a plane all the way down to 10 feet off the ground and you barely, and these guys didn't even learn how to land a jet. But you're going to be able to fly at 10 feet and hit. And to my recollection, there has never been and I could be wrong, a shot taken of the plane hitting the Pentagon.
Well, let's unpack your question. First off, you do realize that Hamzi, who was the pilot of Flight 77, held a commercial pilot's license, right?
No, I was not aware of that.
Yeah, so he could fly a plane. The other thing is that when you say 10 feet off the ground, do you believe that planes get close to 10 feet off the ground when they're landing?
Yeah.
Okay. If you actually go on YouTube,
Uh-huh.
you can literally just type in the search bar 767 high speed low pass.
Okay.
There's several videos of them. But we're not talking about a plane flying for several miles 10 feet off the ground. We're talking about a plane that dove down to 20, 15, lower than that as it got closer to the building. So Flight 77 wasn't, flying that close to the ground for not a long distance. In fact, there are over 100 eyewitnesses to the Pentagon event, either actually seeing the plane in flight. There's a lot of witnesses that saw it actually hit the building, and then you have the witnesses that viewed the aftermath. Not one of those witnesses described the plane flying at like 10 feet off the ground. That just seems to be a misconception that conspiracy theorists like to say that it's impossible for a plane to fly 10 feet off the ground. Well, I mean, for long distances, sure. But we're not talking that Flight 77 was flying at 10 feet off the ground for probably just more than a few hundred yards. And when you look at it, if you Google some of those videos on YouTube, you can actually see 767s flying extremely, a couple hundred feet above the ground, and then some of them are lower. So if the plane is, if it's centered at its target, and he is, if he's dipping down, I mean, he's not gonna be flying at 10 feet off the ground for, miles. It's going to be with the last, few hundred, couple hundred yards before he actually hits the building.
It's also one of the most secure, defense buildings out there. I mean, why was this plane not taken out?
Well, again, nobody knew where the plane was. A lot of people keep forgetting this thing is that, we don't have a system when the plane flies below radar, you're not going to see it. So again, you're going to go for visual aspects of it. And as as we were able to track, Flight 77 so far, we had to come up with what was the pattern that he flew. Because once he was down below radar, it's just basically guessing. Because you don't have any instrumentation that's going to be able to tell you where that plane is, how fast it was going, in which direction it was heading. You don't have any of that when the plane flies below radar. Now, as far as like the Pentagon being the most secure building in the world, or one of the most secure building in the world, yeah, it is, but that's kind of here nor there. Have you ever been to the Pentagon?
No, I haven't. I've never been to the Pentagon.
Well, I haven't actually been to the Pentagon, but I've flown out of DC a few, more than a few times when I was living in Virginia, and the airport's pretty much right next to the Pentagon. On approach and departure, you fly right past it. So you already have a monumental amount of air traffic at the Pentagon 24/7. The other thing is that people are always talking about, well, they should have more cameras. I'm like, well, maybe they did, but again, that's neither here nor there, because people just think of what's a Pentagon, so they have cameras everywhere. Why? I'm sure they have a lot of cameras, but I'm sure they don't have the amount of cameras that conspiracy theorists believe. And they're like, well, they would have cameras this and there. I'm like, they probably had cameras like at doors and like at parking lots, but why would they have cameras that are basically pointing out at like dead space or like at the traffic on the highway?
Where do you think Flight 93 was headed?
I'm sorry?
Where do you think Flight 93 was headed?
Well, it's alleged that Flight 93 was headed towards the Capitol.
I've often heard that or the White House, but something just tells me I don't believe that's where it was headed.
Okay, well, where do you think it was headed?
I don't. I don't have a clue, but just something. To me, if it was headed towards the White House or the government, it would have been one of the first jets, because it would have been trying to take out our government and command and control. So I really don't know where it was headed, but I just don't believe that's where it was headed to.
I guess I'm not sure I understand your statement about that. One of the government buildings should have been like the first.
Okay. What I mean is, because people have always said it was headed towards the White House, right?
No, it's alleged its target was the Capitol.
Okay, well, I've heard the White House, and I've heard the Capitol too. But I've heard the White House more. But I'm not going to get in. That's semantics. My thinking is, if it was headed towards the Capitol, like toward a government building, that would be one of the first buildings to try to take out the government leadership and decapitate command and control.
Well, again, you're dealing with an unconventional. It wasn't Al Qaeda wasn't a military faction; they were terrorists. So terrorists are more concerned about a body count than they are about like a handful of individuals. I mean, they weren't trying to invade the country. They were trying to take out as many people as they possibly could.
But terrorists are also going to understand about command and control. And when they do, if you have no command and control, you're going to, I mean, they do understand that part of the military aspect.
I understand that, but I don't think that the operation about 9/11 had anything to do with that.
Well, I mean, I think it was. I think it had goals in mind to attack the Pentagon to show it could hit the world, the U.S., the world's most powerful military, to hit our financial institutions to show it could hit that. Those three planes take out that. Then the fourth, maybe it could very well have been going to the Capitol to show it could take out our government. I mean, that would probably make the most sense if we'd already taken out the other ones.
Well, I guess my question is that if they were to take out the government, I mean, there was only 19 of them, and they all agreed to do suicide missions. So, I mean, it's not like if they would have taken out the White House or the Capitol that all of a sudden our government would just be no more and there wouldn't be any more, chiefs running around. I mean, terrorism is fundamentally have always been terrorizing and killing a lot of people. They tried to do this in '93 when they bombed the basement of World Trade Center 1, and their whole idea was that they were going to blow up one building and knock it into the other. I think I told you that I kind of got really interested in Middle East terrorism after '93 when the Al Qaeda network pretty much had made themselves known. I thought that was a very interesting subject, and I found the FBI's investigation about the bombing because I was a junior or senior in high school at that time, and I thought that was it was a very interesting subject. So I read a lot of books about that. It was interesting to me, but I still remember on the day of 9/11 where I was working. I'd walked into the office, and so people around were standing around the TV like they were shocked, and I was just like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "A plane just flew into the World Trade, or a plane accidentally flew into the World Trade Center," and it was like that. A light bulb went off in my head, and I'm just like, planes don't accidentally fly into the World Trade Center. And I immediately knew, I'm like, there's going to be another plane. And I don't remember, it was one of my coworkers said, "What are you talking about?" I go, this was their plan in '93. They wanted to take out both buildings. I go, there'll be another plane, or there's going to be a bomb or something. And lo and behold, an hour or so later, we had Flight 175 hit the South Tower.
I wonder when they took over those planes if they said, "Hey, everybody remain calm, don't do anything stupid, and you'll be okay."
Oh, they did that. I mean, the tapes of Muhammad Atta on Flight 11. He got on the comm channel. He thought he was speaking to he thought he was making an announcement on the plane, but what he was actually doing is that he was using the comms to talk to the air traffic controllers, and he said something to the effect of, "Please stay in your seats. Please be quiet. We're going back to the airport," or something like that. And there's obviously not a whole lot of information from that. Of course, we had like Betty Ong, who was a stewardess on Flight 11, that kind of basically said that there were people stabbed in first class. There was reports of one of them had a bomb. all kinds of stuff.
Well,
So
imagine the first thing they did was they went in there and cut the pilots' throats. I mean,
yeah, well, I think that was one of the reports. I'm not too sure if that came from Betty Ong or one of the
you
other
know, a pilot's
stewards.
not going to just, he's not going to fly, that. I remember I watched Flight 93. I'd been drinking a little bit that night, and I was ready to go back over there and go back and fight. But I remember, I kind of got teary eyed because the black lady that was talking to Scott Beamer,
Mm-hmm.
and
Let's
he
roll.
told, well, they went through the conversation, and he told her that we're fixing to try to, take the plane back. We've got a pilot on. And she said, "Are you sure that's what you want to do?" And he said, "Well, they've already did this." He said, "We really don't have a choice." And he said they prayed together, and then he tossed his phone to the side, and she could hear him scream, "Let's roll!" And then the fight took place,
Mm-hmm.
the struggle. And I remember I still had it. And I mean, the Birmingham News the next day had the best quote that I still love, and it said, "A vote was taken." A vote was taken, a plan was made, and the fight was on for control of Flight 93.
Yeah, I mean, if that actually happened, it was the American people who took the fight to Al Qaeda that day.
Yeah,
they,
they took
they
the
were,
fight to them.
yeah. But I mean,
we may die, but
right.
you're not taking. But we're we may all die, but we're going down with the fight. And I guess that that is part of the American way. I mean,
yeah. The other thing was that one of the other big misconceptions that a lot of 9/11 truthers like to talk about is like how the day before 9/11, how Rumsfeld.
Money.
I'm sorry.
You talking about all the money that came up missing? Or?
Yeah, it's I mean, you can actually go and read the Pentagon's report on the money, and this is something that was already known. It was already the press had been waiting for this report to come out, and it had been expected for months that they were going to talk about it, but there never was any actual like missing physical money. It basically boils down to an unbalanced paycheck. They couldn't account for a lot of transactions because of really horrible accounting practices. So there never was any physical missing money from the Pentagon. It was all a bunch of auditing errors. And that's what that report was about. I mean, that's because the Freedom of Information Act, you can actually read that report. It's nothing about missing money. That was nothing that that the press was waiting for Rumsfeld to divulge. They already knew what the deal was. They already knew they were waiting for the report about the transactions that were missing that totaled up to be, I guess, $2.3 trillion or something like that. But all that was unaccounted for spending. It's kind of like when you don't keep track of your checkbook. If you don't write stuff down, you don't know how much money you have and how much money you've spent. I mean, that's fundamentally what that broke down to. But your average uninformed conspiracy theorist is going to spin like, well, all this money was stolen out of the Pentagon. Like, no, there wasn't any money stolen. It was never any physical money. It was all unchecked transactions. That's all it was about. And then it goes into, it was just convenient that the plane supposedly crashed, in the area of the Pentagon where they kept all those records. I'm just like, yeah. And then if it hit another part of the Pentagon, you'd be saying the same thing because that side of the Pentagon like had this and that. I mean, it's just like, it's just a bunch of, it's a bunch of nonsense. Flight 77 could have flown anywhere or crashed on any side of that building, and there would be somebody that's saying, oh, well, that's the wing that housed this or housed that. You know, that's why they crashed into there, because the secrets were in there. And I'm just like, you really have to stretch it as far as you want in order to make that happen. But you know,
Another thing the cover up is, I mean, yeah, I hear the stuff jet fuels burns at this rate and whatever. And I don't know anything about that.
you're talking about the claim that, you know, jet fuel melted steel beams. Well, that's another misunderstanding, that no one ever said that the jet fuel melted anything. But, you know, when you go back to the witnesses, you know, people will say that Flight 77 didn't hit the Pentagon, it was a missile. And I'm like, you know, let's just say that 9/11 was an inside job. Let's say that it all was. The Pentagon and its airspace is dominated by commercial air traffic 24/7. Everybody that lives and works around the Pentagon, the naval annex there, that you know, drives a cab that goes to work on that highway, they're used to seeing commercial aircraft all the time. I mean, it's all the time. They're used to seeing that.
The first reports was a commercial jet hitting it.
Yeah, but like, you know, how somebody could you know confuse a Boeing 767 with a missile, that's pretty crazy. Either people are just so numb to the air traffic they wouldn't notice, or they did notice a 767.
Okay. So put your mind in the mind of a conspiracy theorist right now, or put yourself in the mind of Bush or Cheney or whoever like that. You get information of a possible attack. How do you keep this secret? What do you do? I mean, how do you keep this from going on? Because somebody's going to obviously say, "Hey, I told my superior." Then what's my superior going to say?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're talking about like they knew this was coming and they were going to capitalize on it.
Yeah, like when I asked you earlier about, you know, did you believe they let it happen, and you said you thought it was quite possible and to capitalize on it. You know, how far does this go up that they know it's going to be involved, and you know, and what happens when this guy, you know, this low level, you know, E6 tells his superior, "Hey, this is going to happen," and you know, I'm sure he dies in a car wreck or something.
Well, I mean, I guess that's your view of the military and how the military conducts orders. But I mean, I'm sure that you don't even really have to, you know, have been in the military or know anything about how the military works to realize that you can get that same information from everyday life. I have a thing around the house with the kids, and then my wife and my mother-in-law. It's like I hear one story, and then I hear the same story from two other people,
Okay.
and none of the stories match. And
Yeah.
I actually talked about it the other day. I said, you know what? I said, I'm really tired of one person coming to me telling me something, and then later on somebody tells me the same story, but it's not the same story that I heard. And then I get a third person. I'm like, all right, look, which one of you is lying? Because somebody has to be lying, because none of your stories make sense. And it's not necessarily about something bad. It could be, you know, who took the trash out, who mowed the lawn. I mean, I kind of look at it like that. I mean,
how far do you think this could have went up? I mean, you think this could have went all the way up to Bush and allowing it to happen, or it stops at maybe a lieutenant colonel in the Pentagon? I know these are tough questions to answer, and
I mean, yeah, they're difficult questions to answer. All I say is like,
it's hard. I mean, it's really an impossible question. You know, I mean,
it's not impossible, but it's not impossible, but you have to look at it. It's
not impossible, but you're going, if you start implicating Bush, then you're implicating, you know, just about the whole United States.
Well,
Yeah.
sure, but I mean, we already have people that think that, the bombing at Pearl Harbor they knew about.
I mean,
And they're,
I'm one of the people who I'm not going to say I 100% believe in it, but I, I, I don't have, I have doubts that they allowed that to happen. I mean, I don't think it was a coincidence that every single battleship was, lined up in a row and all the aircraft carriers were out at sea that day.
well, I mean, you have to look back at, see, World War II is another fascination of mine. If you I obviously look behind me, but
I love World War II.
yeah, I'm fascinated with World War II. I mean, that's what behind this whole office behind me is all World War II
We'll have to have a
artifacts.
discussion on that one now.
Yeah, but no, what I'm saying is that that's really not because we chose Pearl Harbor for specific reasons because of its locale, its real estate. Uh, you know, the vessels back then weren't nuclear like they are now, so we actually had to have a hub. And they said that, oh well, they moved them all in there. I'm like, yeah, and then we would have moved them all someplace else too. So if you want to look at it like that, I mean, again, it's kind of like the Pentagon thing. If it would have happened someplace else, you would have said the same thing.
This is the reason that I'm saying um, it allowed it to happen. We had to have an interest to get into World War II. They were not going to let us get into
Well, right.
get involved in World War II because of Germany. And
No.
then, and I'm sure you know this, after Pearl Harbor, the Roosevelt administration was sitting there sweating because they were trying to figure out how to get into Europe. And then Hitler declared war on the United States, the only country that he ever made an official declaration of war on.
True, but we had tried to stay out of the war. I mean, we didn't get involved in the war until the war had already been going on, and we tried to stay out of the war. And one of the reasons we tried to stay out of the war was we didn't really have the materials to do it. We didn't have, we weren't able to because we were worried about them bringing the fight to us, and we wouldn't have been prepared for it. We tried to stay out of World War II for as long as possible. And they realize, the Axis realizes is that if we don't take out, because they had this fundamental thing, like if we go in and take out their navy, then we're not going to have to worry about the U.S. But there was so much backlash from the Empire of Japan not to attack the U.S. There were so many Japanese upper echelons in their military that said, "Don't do it." Yeah, they didn't want to do it. And
I think Yamamoto had actually, if I'm not mistaken, when he made the statement about the sleeping giant, he had trained in American war colleges, and he knew what was going to happen once the U.S. might, took over.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't just that, but Japan had a lot of pressure from Germany. Germany was like, either are you going to be on board with this because you're going to have to accept some of this responsibility, because Germany and Japan wanted to form this pact that had they win the war or they had the upper hand of the war, then they were going to support each other. They were going to open up, they were going to open up this, their trading and all those kinds of. They had, I mean, Germany had basically, because Germany needed an outside. I'm sorry.
That's such a horrible strategy because, I mean, when you look at Japan and where Germany is, they should have invaded the Soviet Union.
Well, they knew they couldn't. They knew that they would never. They knew that they wouldn't do that because the Soviet military had a lot more resources than they did. But anyway, I think we're getting off track of the 9/11 stuff.
We did get off track of 9/11. We just kind of got off conspiracy stuff. I mean, I don't think there was a conspiracy on 9/11.
Well, actually, fundamentally, yeah, 9/11 was a conspiracy. Al Qaeda conspired, with it. I mean, the quote unquote official story is literally about a conspiracy theory. But as we've seen,
that our government, I mean, I'm still not convinced that we didn't allow it to happen, but I can't see our government going in there and planning the whole thing.
If you've learned anything about the U.S. government or really any government anywhere, they're not really good at a lot of things. We
Right.
we can't balance a budget. We can't come up with things to feed the homeless or healthcare. We can't even get these things right, but all of a sudden we had this plan to put a bunch of bombs in the buildings and kill a bunch of our own, take over aircraft. I mean, one thing that I've always said is that, I don't know if there were bombs in the buildings. I can't prove that there wasn't. But at the same time, uh, where's the evidence? The evidence for the bombs in the building only come from the visual evidence from 9/11 truthers. Not a lot of them are willing to talk about any physical evidence of bombs. But if you talk to them about, it took nearly a year, pretty much an entire year, to clean up Lower Manhattan after 9/11. And we're talking about everyone from first responders to volunteers that were involved in cleaning that up. Nobody reported seeing anything suspicious, any suspicious devices, either that day or the weeks or months after that during the cleanup.
Just think about how much that would take going in there, planning these explosives.
Here's the other thing is that, the other conspiracy thing is like, oh, well, they had people that were either with the first responders or the volunteers making sure they didn't find anything. And if they found something, it was confiscated. And I'm like, I don't know if anyone's ever, there's been a lot of people that have witnessed controlled demolitions. But I don't know if so many people know what happens after a controlled demolition. They don't go in and start cleaning it up like right away. There's usually a long period of time before they even start cleanup. I'll talk about that in a second, but when I lived in Kansas City, they controlled demoed an old hotel that was near where I worked, and they didn't start cleaning that area up. They had it fenced off for a number of days before they started cleaning it up. And the reason for that is because they have personnel that work for demolition companies that specialize going in and make sure that all of the ordnance is either, they know it's safe to walk around in. There's no live ordnance where somebody can get injured. And they don't, but the 9/11 truthers seem to think that, because immediately after the buildings collapsed, first responders and every Tom, Dick, and Harry went in there to help to find survivors. But then yet the conspiracy theorists believe that there were these rogue agents that willingly went into the debris to make sure that if anybody found anything suspicious, that would be immediately confiscated, which doesn't make sense, because if this was a controlled demolition, then obviously these rogue agents would know that. At least they were just, I guess, not unaware that there might be unexploded ordnance that could injure or kill them, but not just by that, but just by falling debris from even being in there. But to the days and weeks and the months after that, you didn't hear any reports about anybody finding any, suspicious devices or bombs or det cord or anything like that, things that you would find in a controlled demolition, during a cleanup. But then 9/11 troopers will be like, oh, people heard explosions. I'm sure that they did. In fact, I think it would be really unusual that people didn't hear explosions.
But windows are going to be blowing out.
But people think, but the word explosion doesn't mean like an actual explosive device or a bomb. I'm a former insurance claims investigator that I did for a number of years, and I interviewed a lot of first responders and victims and witnesses. And there was times where I did, house fires and car wrecks and all these other things. And, the first responders or witnesses and during whatever event I was investigating, I had to interview them. They used the terms like, it was like a bomb going off, or I heard a loud explosion. They weren't like talking about like actual bombs or explosives. We only have a few terms to explain what a loud noise is. But 9/11 truthers, they capitalize on that by, so and so heard a large explosion, or they heard, they heard, a loud noise, and they just automatically think that means it was a bomb. But like I said, I would find it unusual if there wasn't secondary explosions or loud noises that people thought they were bombs. I mean, that's just human nature. That's the, we have a limited amount of vocabulary and language to explain certain events.
Right. I guess the guy I felt sorry for the most was, the one they listed as the first casualty was the gay priest that got hit by the guy jumping out of the building. I mean, can you imagine how horrible that had to be that you had to face with smoke to death or jumping out of a building?
Oh, it would be. Absolutely. 100%.
I mean, because, you've been in smoke, not even just, just leaving the oven on and know how smoky it can get. Can you imagine I mean, you just, that's the only thing you've got left. You got to jump. I mean, I was so mad after that day. I was like, and I was so mad at Bush. Like, this is my thinking. I was wanting to launch airstrikes against the holy city of Mecca.
Well, who wouldn't be?
I mean, I wanted to go over there and do like what we did in World War II, where we just rolled through that place and just, killing every person that we seen, and they'd play nice.
But unfortunately, that was kind of the mentality of a lot of people. But and unfortunately, we are involved in 3 wars now where we have straight up murdered civilians that had no part in 9/11.
But it happens.
It does happen. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not saying I'm not sympathetic, but it's collateral damage. It's going to happen, and I'm sorry I shouldn't have done it. I mean, I look at, and people tell me I'm wrong. I look at warfare the way it was supposed to be fought. You were supposed to go in there and kill as many people as you could and destroy their way of life until they need you for self-sufficient, and then they're going to play nice.
Sure.
And these people right here, being around them, there's no negotiating with them. There's no sitting down and talking to them and, trying to work things out. You've got to kill them.
Right.
And when I was over there, the only time I was, and I ain't gonna lie, I was terrified, is I was on guard duty, and I would be up there at the, where they came on the base, and they would take all of them off the trucks, and I would have to pat them down, and I'd be standing by those trucks, and I'm in the kill. There's nothing I can do. I mean, if they blow themselves up, I'm going to be in a million pieces. I mean, that's it. I mean, there's nothing I can do, and there's no negotiating with something like that.
No, there's not.
And and I felt there was one kid I felt sorry for him, and dude, I don't know if you ever smoked hash before, but
yeah, obviously,
dude, this Afghanistan hash was I've never. I mean, just a little pinch hit off that thing, and you was so stone stupid for hours. You didn't even know where you was at. And there was a kid that I used to buy from over there, and he got to go to school 3 days a week for 3 hours a day, and he could speak Pashto in the Kandahar province, Pashto, Russian, English, and French, 4 fluent languages. And I was like, God, if this kid could be in America, he could be whatever the hell he wanted to be.
Well, we've been at this for 2 hours now. Is there anything else you're wanting to ask me about, or?
I mean, I've got enough here to work with to cut down some videos.
Okay.
I want to come back and do some JFK stuff.
Sure.
Because I know you like to do that. Is there any other interest you have? I mean, like I said, I'm trying to interview people with everything that I can think of. Bill McIntosh told me the other night not to do this. He said, but I want to.
Not to do what?
He told me not to interview a person like this. He said, "Oh, you'll just hurt yourself." And I'm like, "Well, I'll just take that chance." I want to interview a transgender. I want to interview somebody who wants to chop their dick off.
Well, transgender doesn't necessarily mean removing your genitalia, right?
Transgender does.
Well, there's some transgender people that haven't removed their.
Well, and I guess I should say that wrong. I should say that right. Not all transgender probably wants to remove their, but transgender will live as a woman, but they live as they'll live as a woman. But I don't
understand why he would think that would be like not good.
I don't know why he did either. I mean, he thought that maybe I would lose subscribers or something. I think I would actually gain subscribers.
You know what? If when you start thinking you're going to lose subscribers, you might as well just stop doing it.
Right, exactly. And I feel like when I first started doing this 3 months ago, I had like 8 or 9 people that I'd follow me, and I hadn't hardly any clips. Well, I've got 200. I got 215 subscribers now, and I've got all kind of people that watch it, and I've got all kind of different stuff, and I just think I want. I mean, it's not like that. I care that I want to sit there and ask this person what makes them want to be a woman. I mean, what makes them a woman makes them be a man? Because I went down there. There's this local bar down there in Birmingham, and how I got drug in there one night, I don't know. But there was some kind of male strip club going on, and I was in there with 2 of the girls that I work with, and one of the dudes, they told me later, he dated a transgender, and I'm thinking, so this guy, and he's only like 21, she's only like 21, so I know she can't afford no $500,000 surgery, so I'm thinking, he's dating a chick with a dick, and I'm like, what? What are you doing?
Well, we just make sure when you interview a transgender person, you don't use that term "chick with a dick" because I'm pretty sure that'll be the end of your interview.
Yeah, I think you've heard me interview enough people that I mean I've done now. Now that George Barwood, that guy, I was having you got to hear one of these clips I did with him. Oh my God, I had these people rolling, but he was talking about JonBenet Ramsey. I said, so let me get this straight. I said, he uses a flashlight to lure her downstairs, feeds her pineapple, hits her with a stun gun, takes her downstairs, bashes her in the head, chokes her to death with a Garrett, while sexually assaulting her all at the same time. Is that what you're telling me? He goes,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's something that you should probably look into and do an interview with that. But I mean, don't let people tell you that if you do that, you're going to lose subscribers.
No, I'm not. So. I mean, the thing I wanted to do this my own way, and I think so far it's did all right. I mean, I've got great interviews. I think this right here is going to be a great interview. I can't wait to edit and start cutting it and everything.
Cool.
This was because I like, made me feel good the other night when you said, you said something like, these are really good or something.
Yeah, they are. You need to keep it up,
I try to keep them interesting. One thing I don't like doing is, which I'll cut this one down, and, I'll have like 4 segments, is what I found is you're going to keep people's attention between 15 to 30 minutes, instead of 3 hours. And,
sure.
people are going to watch 30-minute segments as opposed to 3 hours. I started breaking down some of Fred's O.J. Simpson stuff, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So, if you got anything else like you're interested in, man, I mean, you said something about NASCAR. I mean, hell, I'll interview you about NASCAR.
I'm not really much of a NASCAR fan. I just went to a NASCAR race, so.
There was one guy, and I'm trying to figure out that I want to interview him, but I'm trying to figure out how to do it because I'm a Trump supporter too. But he's one of these West Virginia guys who was, I think he was up there when they stormed the Capitol. And I just, I don't know how to go about doing this.
Well, just do what you want. So, but anyway, I'm going to run. So I hope this was good for you. It was great talking to you.
Blast.
What's that?
I had a blast. Let's set it up again, man.
Yeah, well, we can talk about something else, most definitely.
We'll do Kennedy.
Yeah, that'll be fun to do. It'll be fun to do.
We can. You said something about you didn't have a specialty or something. We can do like me and Ahmad did. Just chat.
Sure, absolutely, man.
Sounds good, John.
All right, well, take care. Have a good night.
But you too.
All right, bye.